Hi, welcome everybody. Good evening from Georgia and Azerbaijan. My name is Thomas Lamo. I'm the Senior Program Manager of CEU Executive MBA. Welcome to the CEU Executive MBA Open Day in Baku and Tbilisi. I will guide you through this evening what to expect tonight. First of all, I will start with the program presentation, followed by a keynote presentation of one of our faculty members. And in the end, we'll have a Q&A session. If you have any questions about the program, please feel free to DM me or just use the chat box on Zoom, and I will collect the questions for the Q&A session at the end of the event. So without further ado, let's get started. So the problem you're facing right now, or let's put it that way, the question you might be asking yourself is an MBA still worth it? Because you don't have to go very far these days to encounter that we are witnessing fundamental transformations in the world in a century. In 2008, we've seen a big financial crisis. In 2015, we've seen a large refugee crisis. We're in the biggest pandemic in a century, and war is raging in Europe again after the Second World War. And these changes are part of a much broader set of transformation that is taking place. And some of them are positive, but some of them are pretty dangerous. And the key question is, how do we as business professionals, how do you as business professionals prepare for this challenging and unpredictable environment? And the obvious question is an MBA the way to do it? We have seen an explosion of online education over the last 2 years, and I will show you why we believe our MBA is still worth it. So if you're looking for executive education, you usually start reaching for the stars. You're starting research on Google, looking for the best business schools out there, because of course you deserve the best education out there. What you tend to find with the leading business schools in the world, most of them are based in the US, is that these leading business schools are they offer a very differentiated or mission-driven MBA curriculum. What does it mean? They offer a certain expertise, a certain perspective, and certain values they stick with. Another advantage of those leading business schools is that they offer a program delivered by faculty with top credentials coming from other leading business schools. And of course, their faculty is international because of their reputation and the attractiveness of these programs. And the same argument applies to the student body. Because of the attractiveness and because of the reputation of these leading business schools, they actually have a very international student body that you can benefit from, of course. Another main advantage is that these universities offer a campus experience that we know from movies that take place at university campuses, at American universities. They do not offer just a university building. They do not offer just education per se. They offer a sense of belonging within a community. But within the same research, you'll find out that these leading business schools come with some disadvantages, very strong disadvantages. So let's start with the strongest disadvantage, which is tuition. These leading business schools offer MBA programs starting at tuition of 120,000 euro or 100 or even more, and the same amount applies to dollars, of course, of tuition plus expenses. And in addition to this tuition, you might be forced to be away from your job for at least a year, sometimes even 2 years, which brings another disadvantage that with these programs, you might need to relocate your family to the new MBA location. And this all adds up to a very, very severe financial burden for you. So if this frightens you off, you usually start looking for MBA programs in the region or in the city you live in. And what you tend to find with these programs is that local programs, they do not offer a mission-driven MBA curriculum. Basically, their MBA curriculum is plain vanilla. It doesn't offer a certain expertise. It doesn't offer a certain perspective. It's just a vanilla curriculum. Since these programs are regional and not really attractive on the international level, their faculty members come mostly from the region, the country that the university is based in, but it's not an international faculty body that you will be taught by. And the same argument, of course, applies to the student body. Regional programs attract regional students. So you will be in a class with people from the same city, from the same country, or the same region, but let's not call it an international program. Of course, regional programs offer a very strong advantage, which is lower tuition at leading business schools. So their tuition at local business schools, for example, here in Tbilisi, is just 14,000, 15,000 euro or 35,000 euro, the maximum of tuition. And another advantage is that there is no work interruption, because you will be attending an MBA in the city you live in. So you can basically stay on your job and attend higher education. But what we do at CEU is to offer the best of those two worlds. First of all, let's start with the strongest and most compelling argument, which is tuition. Basic tuition at CEU is 29,000 euro, which is per se competitive compared to other programs. But if you're benefiting from our need-based and scholarships and fellowships, you can reduce tuition to up to 15,000 of tuition, which basically equals the tuition of local MBA programs, but at a higher quality level. And needless to say, people from the region, from, for example, Georgia, Azerbaijan, Turkey, Armenia, Iran, they are eligible for need-based scholarships or country-specific merit-based scholarships. I will talk about this country-specific fellowships at a later point. Another advantage is that there is no work interruption. You will stay on your job and attend the modules in Vienna and Budapest because of the modularity of the program. This is a major advantage of the program. There is no work disruption and no additional financial burden for you. I will talk about the flexible modular format later in this presentation. Also, the executive MBA, the CEU executive MBA, is very much mission driven. It's called the executive MBA for the open world. And I think I don't have to emphasize the importance of open worlds, especially these days, when you just watch the news these days. I will talk about this mission later in this presentation. We have an international student body because of the modularity of the program. Actually, CEU is the second most international university, and this is being reflected in the student body, but also in the faculty body, and of course, the alumni body. All of our faculty members from around the world, of course, come from the best universities, those universities that you've done research on in the first place. We have them. All of our faculty members come from top universities like Harvard, Stanford, Berkeley, MIT, Yale, Princeton, etc. So with participants can fly in, can fly out, which is a major advantage of the program. And we offer a multi-campus experience since the modules take place in Vienna and Budapest. So you'll gain a Western, Central European Western perspective and a Central European Eastern perspective in the executive MBA. So when we say world-class faculty, we actually mean it. For economics, for example, Mark Kaufmann, an expert in applied theory with a PhD from Harvard University, he will teach you. Or just to give you another example, Professor Isosenius with a PhD from Central Florida. She's an expert on marketing and emotional marketing in particular. The course on big data and artificial intelligence will be taught by Miklos Koren, one of the leading scholars in the field in Europe with a Harvard PhD. If you're new to finance, Joy is a uniquely gifted educator. Generation after generation of our students tell us how she's just unique in explaining complex financial concepts. But if you're already experienced in finance, you'll be placed in the advanced track course with Professor Adam Zawodowski, a leading expert on complex investments with a PhD from Princeton University. For innovation, you'll have Mike Labelle, who holds a prestigious EU Jean Monnet chair. Or on the topic on the future of work, Sofia Barani with an PhD from LSE. She's an expert on automation, artificial intelligence, and robotics. And last but not least, for strategy, you'll have Yusuf Akbar, who has taught in more than 40 countries and advises leading Fortune 500 companies. So that's just to give you an impression of our faculty, but to give you an impression of our visiting faculty, I would like to introduce you to some of our visiting faculty members. For example, Professor Christian Zelos, an innovation expert from Stanford University, or Miklos Savary, an expert on digital marketing from Columbia University, Omar Hernandez, an expert on operations management from Berkeley Hess Business School, Professor Hui Jen from the University of Zurich, or Professor Paula Caproni from the University of Michigan. As you can see, both the visiting faculty and the faculty are coming from the best universities in the world. So here's what the program looks like. It's a 10-module program. The dates you can see on the screen right now are not going to change. So you can basically plan your studying around professional and family activities based on these dates. As you can see in the top row, we have 3 modules in the first year, 4 modules in the second year, which is the center row, and 3 modules in the third year, which is the bottom row. You might have noticed that we are piggybacking around popular European holidays like May 1st or November 1st or August 15th, when in most European countries there's a public holiday and it's easier for you to take time off and attend the modules. However, we're always piggybacking around long weekends, so it's easier for you to take time off your job and actually join the modules on site. In the summers, our bespoke and cutting-edge leadership program takes place in Budapest, and you'll have the opportunity to benefit from electives from the faculty in the world we invite to teach your classes. And actually, it's a nice coincidence that the head of the leadership program at CEU Executive MBA is going to deliver the keynote presentation at tonight's open day. So one day, eventually, there will come the day when you finish with us and you will join the CEU alumni from around the world. As I already said, CEU is the second most international university in the world, and you can rely on an active elite network on every continent. We have city-level chapters, we have country-level chapters, basically wherever you are in the world or wherever you might go in the future in the world, you will find CEU alumni to interact with. And it's very easy to reach out to that network in a structured way through our alumni relations department. For example, if you're looking for a specific person in a specific industry, in a specific city, in a specific company, they'd be happy to establish contact for you. Or you can just reach out in a very informal way through our social media groups on LinkedIn and Facebook if you just want to meet up in a new city and make new friends. And this is a network that you can count on, a network of more than 18,000 professionals around the world, and one of the key assets that we have. So the question you might have is, how are we even able to offer such a high quality program at only 29,000 euro of tuition or 15,000 euro of tuition if you applied for a scholarship? The answer is pretty simple and lies in our benefactor and George Soros, who created CEU with the mission to promote open society. Just recently, George Soros made a further contribution to CEU's mission by offering another billion with a B, in endowment to create the Open Society University Network, which means we are the best endowed university in Europe. And we are passing on this financial advantage to our students and participants. So what does the Executive MBA for the open world mean? What makes CEU so unique compared to other programs? First of all, when we talk about open world, we mean skepticism towards hierarchies, towards dogmas, and privileges, both in context of how we teach, but also in composition of the cohort. Diversity is key to creating a successful program. And for us, diversity is not just an empty marketing catchphrase, it's part of our DNA. Secondly, we believe in debate and radical rational thinking. Every idea can be challenged. We believe in facts and arguments rather than narratives and fake news, because it's narratives and fake news that create polarization and lies in our societies these days. We believe the best way to challenge this narrative-based discourse is to make arguments based on facts and realities, actually, which is the hallmark of Karl Popper's definition of open societies. We are fundamentally opposed to all kinds of discrimination, and we actively promote diversity within our program. The way we finance the scholarship means we create opportunities for people who traditionally have not been able to actually join programs like this. And we see managers not just as people who deal with businesses and resources, but we also believe that managers go beyond that. They are positive change agents, no matter what their profession is. If they're coming from the traditional corporate world, if they're entrepreneurs, if they're coming from NGOs, the public sectors, or the human rights field, everybody can contribute to being a positive change agent. So what does the CEU Executive MBA classroom look like? Currently, we have 65 managers with an average of 14 years of work experience, including a minimum of 3 years of leadership/managerial experience. As you can see from the image in the background, we use state-of-the-art classroom technology and setups in order to facilitate lively discussion and interaction in class. As far as teaching is concerned, we make use of case-based learning rather than traditional lectures that you would find in local MBA programs. Because we want to take you, experts in your specific field, from this level of functional expertise to the strategic level. Of course, the best education offered does not only apply for on-site education, it also applies to online education. If you want for any reason to participate online, you can choose to opt in for online education. At every module, you can decide freely and flexibly if you want to participate online or on-site. However, we encourage everybody to attend on-site because, first of all, it's the better learning experience. And besides the learning experience, let's be honest about it, it's just way more fun. Don't think about education only. It's about, building up a network. It's about lunch breaks, coffee breaks, dinner breaks, going out together in the evenings where you make new friends and build up a network that you can count on. As far as the infrastructure is concerned, we have heavily invested in studio-grade microphones capturing the lecturers and all participants, because we think that education, the transfer of knowledge, is not just a one-way street from the lecturer to the student. It also applies vice versa from the participant to the lecturer, but also among fellows. Of course, we have invested in large screens and high-quality cameras to capture all online participants. So it's easier for you to follow discussion in class or follow discussion if you are participating online. We have created physical virtual breakout rooms for support teams and created personalized virtual backgrounds that you can see on the left of the slide right now. Speaking of support teams, the support teams are the basically the groups that you will be placed in to do your group work with. But there's something very unique about the support teams because we handpick those support teams based on our diversity approach, which means you will be exposed to as much diversity as possible. You will not be placed in a support team with people coming from the same country, with the same linguistic background, from the same organization or the same industry, because this is where diversity really kicks in, when you're exposed to different decision-making processes, solution-making techniques, debate techniques. This is where you will learn and you will find new arguments and new techniques. You might have noticed the color codes on the left with the names, and this is just an indication for the support teams. So it's easier for you to know who belongs to which support team and who said what in a lively debate. You need to remember who said what in these debates, because we have 360-degree peer evaluation, which means whatever you say in class, in those debate entries, you will be assessed not only by your professor, by the lecturers, of course, you will also be assessed by your fellows based on your debate entries, based on the quality of your debate entries, and vice versa. You will assess your fellows based on their debate entries. And of course, at every level that you're with us, we offer high quality individual support, from the level of just inquiring about the program to actually applying for the program, to enrolling into the program, to being a current participant, becoming an alumni, or being an alumni. You will get the treatment that you deserve, which is the best high quality individual support out there. So tuition, basic tuition is 29,000 euro, and it's for the whole program and includes all the credits. As I already said, people from the region, Georgia, Azerbaijan, the whole region, everybody can basically apply for a need-based scholarship or country-specific fellowships, which can reduce tuition to as low as 15,000 euro of tuition with the need-based scholarships. We offer a fellowship for Georgia. I will talk about it later. As I said, there is an online option. Participants can join online if traveling is inconvenient, or if they have any underlying health conditions, for example, they can choose to opt in for online education. In order to defray your other costs, we have negotiated special rates with partner hotels in Vienna and Budapest, ranging from the budget level to luxury level. And we have negotiated discount rates with partner airlines like Lufthansa Group and Austrian Airlines, which will bring you to Vienna and Budapest at a lower rate. So I invite you to join the open world. The application deadline is March 27th, and the application starts online on our website. I strongly encourage you to apply as soon as possible, because we have a first come, first served policy. And the sooner you apply, the sooner you can reserve your study seat. You're invited to book a one-on-one consultation with me through our website, with me to discuss any questions that you might have, to optimize your application, or to discuss your individual financial situation as far as scholarships and fellowships are concerned. So I think it's one thing to hear about the program from the program office. I mean, you have, without a doubt, you have noticed that we're passionate and committed about the program. But I think it's another thing to hear about the program from current participants. And I'm lucky to welcome current participants here in Tbilisi, at the Open Day here in Tbilisi, who are willing to share their impressions about the Executive MBA. Georgi, if you would like to join me, please, for a second. I would like to introduce you to Georgi Lomidze. He's he's a participant from Georgia. And if you could just briefly introduce yourself and tell us who you are and what your profession is.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for introduction, Thomas. Well, my name is Georgi Lomidze. I'm currently coming from Georgia, but working in different countries, having a projects in terms of banking management consultancy. Recently working in with the Ukrainian bank and with Uzbekistan bank. So it's really the wide range experience I have, and especially in this particular situation, the experience from university, especially from CEU, was the great added value in my professional career and professional life. This is part of my introduction. A few words from my experience, as I have joined the CEU 2 years ago, so it's my last year actually. Due to the COVID, there was a bit disruption in the beginning, but I was lucky enough to have experienced the on-site modules as well. The way I choose CEU was the combination of the points which Thomas already mentioned, and for me personally, the key and important takeaway from the whole course is that the diversity of the classmates and diversity of the faculty. I will explain briefly what do I personally mean in this. When we talk about diversity at CEU in terms of faculty, for me, it combines the experience and expertise from the academic and from the practical sphere of the background. So I had the possibility, and I was really lucky to meet with the faculty members who are bringing the academic background in a practical way. So when you have a possibility to feel the hands-on approach when there is a discussion of any heavy or the simple academic topics, so it becomes more easier and then more smooth to dive into the subject from academic theoretical point of view to the practical hands-on level. And on the other hand, the diversity I personally experienced in terms of my classmates, we are 50 plus in the classroom, and the people are coming from, what is most important for me, from the corporate sector, from the governmental sector, from non-governmental sector. We have classmates from the entrepreneurship background, and all this diversity brings any discussion on the classroom in a way that you are involved. It's impossible that you cannot share your opinion, and it's impossible that you cannot take as much as possible added value from the discussions. So that's the key point and key takeaway after 2 years of being part of CEU group.
You mentioned so many bullet points. I took notes. I allow myself to take notes. You mentioned the international format, and you're basically a global citizen. I mean, the last time we met, you were based in Egypt, and now things have changed again and again. But I think that's reality for most international businessmen, that you never know where you will be based in, the next week, the next year. And this modular format gives you full flexibility, because, as I already said, it's 3 modules on average per year, piggybacking around popular European holidays. So it doesn't matter where you are based, if you're based in Tbilisi, if you're based in Zurich, or if you're based in New York City. It doesn't make a difference, because it's only traveling 3 times a year. And if you're not able to travel, you can participate online. You have also mentioned the COVID disruption, which is interesting. I just want to add that, of course, we have been affected by the whole COVID situation, by the whole pandemic. I mean, who hasn't? But just to be clear, we have put everything in place to ensure the highest safety that is possible out there. We have started with antigen testing before they have been accessible on the broader scale in October 2020. It's almost unbelievable that in October 2020, antigen tests and PCR tests have not been available to the broader public. But we have implemented antigen testing and tested people every second day during the modules, because we wanted to avoid disruption. We only did 1 module in, I think it was May 2020, if I remember correctly, that was taking place fully online, but not because of our logistics, because of the legal requirement in Austria. We were just not allowed to welcome people on site when the pandemic peaked in 2020. So much about the COVID disruption. You already mentioned the strategic level, and I think this is a very good example of the target group of the people that we're aiming for. Whatever your profession is, if you're coming from the traditional corporate world, if you're an engineer, if you're an artist, if you're coming from the NGO field, the public sector, you will achieve, or you have achieved, a level of functional expertise where you will need to move on to the strategic level. And we will equip you with the skills, the leadership skills that are necessary for you to climb that career ladder and to become a better leader based from the profession that you are right now. Sure.
Well, yeah,
say something.
The few words on the last point, because I mean, the diversity I mentioned regarding the background of the people, of the participants of the modules, that exactly brings the perspective of being a strategic leader from different angle, and that's one of the great points I would like to mention, because I personally, coming from the banking sector and working from senior management -1 level, recently working as a senior management level, and from this perspective, when talking and discussing the topics with the people from the entrepreneurship background, the people from non-governmental sector, people from governmental sector,
right,
or other corporate sector, that gives a lot of huge opportunity to widen your view, and personally my view, in terms of the leadership, in terms of the strategic planning, because that involves into the topic all different perspective,
right.
And that's a great, I would say, added value in my case.
You mentioned, I mean, you perfectly described diversity and perfectly described how people would benefit from diversity, because some people only refer to diversity as a catchphrase, not knowing how they would benefit from diversity. Is basically diversity, where you benefit from diversity, is when you're exposed to new ideas, to different learning techniques, to different, solution making and decision making processes. This is where you will learn, and this you can only have in a diverse setting. And diversity for us not only applies to different nationalities. We are already the second most international university, so you will be in a class with people coming from 5 continents, basically. But diversity is, for us, is more than just passports. It's different gender identities. It's a huge age range that we have in class. It's about people coming from different backgrounds, from corporate world to entrepreneurship, from medical field, engineering, and even arts and culture are represented in the current MBA. And of course, the NGO, public sector, and human rights. By the way, speaking of human rights and humanitarian involvement, we're happy to host this open day at Open Society Foundation's office here in Tbilisi. And I think it's a strong message that also people from the public sector, NGOs, and human rights are very welcome and to the program. Georgi, thank you. Is there anything else you would like to add?
Yeah, one more point, which sure. I think would be interesting for the online participants, is that does not matter from which sector you are coming from, whether it is finance or non-finance, so whether it is a technical or non-technical subject, there is no challenge in order to be involved at the level of the group, because there is a different classes. So if somebody comes from the finance sector, it does not mean that the whole group needs to be on the same level. The group can be split, and that also was the flexibility of the modules that allow everybody to be involved. So if somebody comes from the NGO sector who never had a contact in terms of, let's say, financial or, let's say, statistical topics, even such kind of professionals were really heavily involved into the discussions, because the levels were balanced in really professional ways. So that's another point I wanted to.
You're perfectly referring to the advanced and beginners track that you might remember that when I introduced some of our faculty members, I mentioned the advanced track and the beginners track. Of course, people with knowledge in finance or control, they will not be placed in the beginner's track because they already know the linguistics and the terms of finance. They will be placed in the advanced track with Adam Zawodowski. If you're new to finance, don't be frightened off by the MBA, by the Master of Business Administration, if you don't have any business background. If you don't have any business background, you will be placed in the beginner's track and the standard track, where you will learn the linguistics that you would need to talk to stakeholders at your level. Because at any point, at this point of your profession, even though if you're not in a finance-related industry or profession, you need to understand the linguistics, and you need to be able to talk to stakeholders about balance sheets and numbers and finances. Georgi, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you so much. I would like to move on to the next part of the evening, which is our keynote presentation by Professor Austin Lee Nichols. He's the head of the management section and the head of CEU Executive MBA's leadership program. He's got a bachelor's degree in psychology from Florida State University, a master's degree in psychology from the University of Florida, a master's degree in management from the University of Florida, and a PhD in psychology from the University of Florida. And he will deliver a keynote presentation on a very interesting leadership topic, which is, what do you want in leaders? Thank you very much, Austin, for coming tonight. The floor is yours.
Welcome, everybody, online and in person. So as Thomas mentioned, my focus is really on leadership. And I asked several questions related to leadership that I think are really interesting and novel and important. But one of them that has really kind of struck me from the time where I really started thinking about leadership in a research perspective is this kind of general, what seems like very simplistic idea or question of, what do you want in your leaders? And so what I'm going to talk to you about today is a little bit about just kind of leadership in general, how we get to where we are now, some of the things we've learned along the way, as well as focus some time on my specific research and the studies that I have run to try to answer this question. So to begin, I really just want to focus on this idea of what is leadership, and at least define it so that we all kind of are on the same page. This definition, I think, is pretty simple, but does the job. It's the ability to influence a group toward the achievement of a vision or a set of goals. Okay? So key points here, we're talking about a group. We're not talking about one person. And we're talking about trying to get them to achieve something, okay? Some vision, some goals. Okay? That's what leadership is, getting people to that finish line, you might say. And so basically, there's a whole set of research that looks at leadership in different ways. One looks at leader behaviors. One kind of stemmed from that and looks at styles of leadership, as you might have heard before. And then one really looks at the personality of the leader. All of these are important, okay, and all of these are relevant, but it's important to kind of understand where leadership research has gone, how it's progressed, so that we can get to what I'll be focusing on, which is trait desirability. And I'll do that by first introducing this idea of implicit leadership theories. So from the very beginning, the question was, what is it that leaders do? What's so special about a leader? And so Ohio State, and actually kind of at the same time, Michigan, sought out to answer this question by really just observing leader behavior. And so both of them, okay, really at the same time, calling it something slightly different, determined that there were really two main sets or types of behavior that leaders engaged in. One was that really focused on reflecting the task, so trying to get the task done and completed. And one was that focused on the people or the relationships and trying to really foster those relationships, more kind of person focus. And so through all these studies, that was kind of the core of what began as this idea of behavioral theories of leadership. And what those behavioral theories kind of turned into was what we often talk about as styles, because styles are essentially groups of behaviors. And so one you probably have heard about before, it's very popular, is transformational leadership. So everyone wants to be a transformational leader and talks about leaders being transformational. Okay? And this is, as far as research goes, what it is that we're talking about as far as transformational leadership. Those 4 I's, as we call them, those on the right top of the figure make up what is transformational leadership. Those three sets of behaviors on the bottom left of the figure make up what we call transactional leadership, the absence of transformational leadership. So from the very bottom left, we start with essentially no leadership, a laissez-faire leadership, essentially doing nothing. We move to something a little more, let's say, productive, and that's management by exception. So leadership where you wait for something to happen and then you step in and try to lead. From there, we get to contingent reward, which is essentially very transactional. So I pay you every week and you produce 10 units. Okay, that's it. I give you this, you give me that. Nothing more, nothing less. But again, transformational leadership, as the research really focuses on, is about these 4 I's. So what transformational leaders do, for example, is starting from the top, they influence through their ideals. They motivate by inspiring people. They stimulate people intellectually, and they really focus on the individuals. They give consideration to individuals rather than just the group. So everybody feels like they're heard, they're appreciated, and so forth. Okay? So that's what transformational leadership is, just to give it one example of a leadership style. I'm going to talk about a couple that have come since then, because the research, although suggests transformational leadership is important, there are some kind of newer styles that have won more favor recently. One is authentic leadership. So these leaders know who they are and they act on those beliefs. Okay, so I am who I am, I know who that is, and I'm going to act in accordance with that. Ethical leadership. So this is more focused on purely ethical behavior. And then the newest, and the one that's really starting to make the biggest splash in the leadership literature, is servant leadership. So servant leaders learn how to lead through serving others rather than requiring, demanding, or asking people to serve them. So they say, what is it that I can do to best serve those who follow me, who answer to me? What is it that they want out of life? What is it that motivates them? How can I create a situation where my subordinates are happy, fulfilled, and engaged so that the group benefits, I get to those goals I want to, but at the same time, my subordinates are getting something and they're progressing in life and in their careers as well. So again, that's behavior, okay? And that's one way to look at leadership. The other, and what I'm focusing on today, is personality. So what is it about people as individuals that makes them different, that makes them leaders, okay? And how is this potentially successful for them or not successful for them? What differentiates the two? A lot of the research does this by looking at what we call the 5-factor model of personality. This idea that everything about someone's personality can be boiled down to 5 factors. One is extroversion, which you're all probably quite familiar with. One is openness to experience. So are people creative? Are they open to new things? One is agreeableness. So are people agreeable or argumentative, you might think of as the kind of opposite? Are people emotionally stable? So can they stay calm in very stressful times or not? And are people conscientious? So are they reliable, organized, responsible? And these 5 factors have received a lot of attention about questions such as, are leaders more successful with some of these traits? Are they more likely to become leaders with some of these traits? Are leaders, followers happier if leaders have some of these traits? And so basically, what all of this boils often down to is understanding that leaders, as far as their personality goes, like being around other people. They're generally able to assert themselves, okay? They're extroverted, they're disciplined, able to keep commitments. So conscientiousness is very important. And they're often creative and flexible. They're open-minded. This is generally what is helpful or facilitates being a successful leader. However, again, just understanding what someone's personality is and trying to predict if they're going to be a good leader off of it misses out on a lot of contextual factors. one of those that implicit leadership theory really focused on was how those match or don't match the expectations of followers. So great, I might be completely extroverted, and the research we just talked about says that extroversion is generally beneficial for a leader. But what if I'm in a context or in a leadership role where my followers expect me not to be extroverted? If I'm extroverted, will I still be successful in those situations? And so implicit leadership theories asked about how typical people think certain traits are, certain characteristics, certain parts of people's personality are. They asked people to think of their prototype of a leader. And they looked at things like response times. How quickly can you say that I think of extroversion when I think of a leader versus agreeableness or something else? And there's a lot of promising results that came from this, basically saying that this does matter. So there needs to be this match between what people expect in a leader and what they actually get in that leader, and that the role matters. Okay, so this isn't just all leaders, really the context really matters here. So what I sought to do was ask what I thought was a little more important of a question, which is not is what a leader does or who a leader is consistent with what people expect of that leader, but actually of what they want someone in that leader to be, someone in that leadership role to be. So I looked at things like what's ideal in a leader in that role? What do you desire? And I asked them to prioritize different characteristics, okay, to really have to choose some over others. And so the questions, or some of the questions, really revolved around what traits do people desire in all leaders? So are there traits that just everybody wants in any leadership role? Okay, it's kind of a base, a core that we can start with. B, does this desirability differ across different roles? So are there traits, for example, in one leadership position that are desired much more than in another? And then overall, is this trait desirability predictive of things that we care about in organizations? So to begin and to really get me into that, I relied on this general idea of leader behavior and also personality depending on the situation. And so here's just one example of how you can see these task and relationship oriented behaviors that I talked about at the very beginning. What you see at the bottom here are 8 different situations, different types of leadership situations where member relations are good or bad, where the structure of the task is high or low, where the leader's position power is high or low, okay? And a mix of all these. And you can see, without going too much into this figure, that in leaders of certain situations, task-oriented behaviors are much more productive and successful in those situations. But in slightly different situations, if maybe one of those things changes, for example, the task structure is actually low, not high, now it could be that relationship-oriented behaviors are important. That's how influential the situation is to what is successful and what is beneficial for leaders to do. So I took that idea, combined it with other things, for example, skills, saying that at different levels of management, people often need different skills, and leadership at these different levels looks a little different because of the skills that they need to use, to come up with a couple studies, and several studies really, but I'll present 2 here, about how this might look with desirability of traits and what people want in their leaders. So if you look at the second 2 points here, one of the kind of simplest ways to think about it is that maybe leaders that are lower or maybe closer to me, assuming I'm kind of a line level employee, I interact with them a lot. So I want them to have interpersonal traits. I want them to be easy to get along with. But at high level leadership roles where I may never see that person, those maybe aren't so important. Maybe instead I want someone to be kind of authoritative, make decisions, more dominant related traits. Okay, just to give you one example. So in study 1, basically what I did was I took undergraduate students who had no experience, because I wanted to get a very clean slate, okay, before you ever are influenced or changed by any of your experiences in life and in work, what do you actually want your leaders to be? And would that differ based off of the level of the leadership? Okay. So I looked at two levels, the lowest level and the highest level of 6 different domains. So you can see here in order, they're military, sports, traditional business, education, social clubs, and politics. Sorry, they're slightly different order on low and high. Okay, so 6 different domains. The lowest level leader that I would likely interact with, and the highest level leader that I would ever even, potentially interact with in each of those hierarchies. And I used the big 5, like we just talked about, but I also added some interpersonal traits, some dominant related traits, okay, to go along my hypotheses, and also intelligence, because intelligence seems to be extremely important in all of the leadership research. And it's not personality, but it's still an individual difference, okay, a trait of a leader. And what I found was that traits do differ in desirability. So people didn't rate all of the traits equally desirable. Okay, that's step 1. And I found that trustworthiness and intelligence really seem to be desired more than all the rest overall. So this is what I'm starting to call this core of leadership. So people want to be able to trust their leaders and know that they're competent. And then everything else seems to really depend on the role, in this case, the hierarchy and the level of the hierarchy. So for example, ambition, people wanted someone at a higher level to be more ambitious than someone at a lower level. Same for assertiveness, courage. Okay. And so I then took another study to ask that question to actual working people who now have already had experience, various sets of experience and lengths of experience. And I asked them, what is it that you desire in the leader who you report to specifically? So not just kind of a made up leader, but your supervisor. What do you desire in that person? Tell me about that actual person in the role, and tell me about what you would expect, what the typical person in that role would be, to see the congruency or the connection, disparity between those 3. And what this shows is just a very simple set of results suggesting that when we look at things like job satisfaction, leader-member exchange, or the relationship quality between leaders and followers, and the commitment to the organization, all of these very highly depended on whether someone's actual personality or traits as a leader matched with what people wanted that person to be in that role, okay, as their supervisor. Now, I have to admit, the prototype difference, or that implicit leadership theory that we talked about before, this also mattered, but the congruency between what people expected and what they had was less important than between what they wanted and what they had, suggesting both are important, but maybe the desire is slightly more important. Okay. So now, after these studies and several others, it seems like there's this core of what people want in a leader. So not only is it trustworthiness and intelligence, but I'm getting more and more consistent evidence that people also want someone who's ambitious. One way to think about it is someone who wants to lead, wants to be a leader. And then other traits really seem to differ based off the level of leadership, the domain of leadership, the experience of the person who's responding, okay, talking about their desirability. All of these things seem to matter. And so overall, I'm suggesting organizations really should consider the traits that individuals desire in leaders on an individual role basis. So who are these people that are needing to be assigned a leader? Okay? And how can I select a leader based off of what these people want, this group wants? That's essentially the gist of it. And I'm going to continue doing this. And ultimately, I think one way to think about this is not only how do we select someone into a role, but how do we train them so that they can act more like what people want in that group. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I'd be happy to take questions either directly or through Thomas.
Thank you very much. Speaking of questions, we have the honor of welcoming Maciej Kiszlowski to your keynote presentation, who is, I guess, just waiting to challenge you academically. I can feel it that he's just waiting to ask you some questions. But just to introduce Maciej to our attendees tonight, he's the faculty director of CEU Executive MBA, with a GSD degree from Yale Law School, an MPA from Princeton, and an MBA from INSEAD. Maciej, thank you very much for joining us tonight. What a surprise.
Yes, good evening. You know, in such a difficult moment and in such difficult times, but I think also such a fitting moment to talk about leadership and what leadership really means. But, you know, given the moment we are in, the question that I wanted to ask is, to what extent, in your opinion, or based on the research that you see, these expected traits that people expect in their leaders are a reflection of, you know, what we culturally and societally think a leader should be. Yes, in other words, you know, a big part of open society idea is that many relations in life are reflexive. Yes, that, you know, we expect something we were conditioned to expect, and I wanted to know your opinion about that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think without going too deep into obviously current events, I think even when we think about people from different countries, if we really want to kind of be open-minded and think about people from different countries on different sides of wars throughout history, there is a lot of influence throughout their lives of what they believe and what they expect. And so, you know, it's easy to cast blame on, you know, people that are on the wrong side of something. But really, it's, I think it's reflective of kind of the question you raise, which is everything about us as we grow up and as we deal with different experiences ends up influencing us in one way or another. And I think often that happens by going through, and this is, I think, exactly why I wanted to disentangle the difference between what people expected and what they desired, because I think that expectations are almost solely based off of this experience, whereas I think desires can very well at some point digress, maybe dramatically, from what people expect. And this is also why in that first study I wanted to take people who had very little or no experience to see what they wanted, because I know that as soon as you get into a role, and some of these students already had some of this experience, but it's the more you interact with people, even, you know, if you think about it, when it comes to leadership, we get information about leadership from everything we do. So if I'm checking in at the hotel and I'm greeted by the hotel manager, I'm looking at this person and thinking, okay, this is a leadership role. And I'm seeing how this person acts, and I'm internalizing it at least somewhat and saying, okay, so a leader in this context seems to act like this. And if these obviously are consistent, you know, if every hotel I check into, I get the same experience, then I, at the very least, would probably say, okay, a hotel manager, this is what to expect. This is what they act like. And so, yeah, I think everything we do in life on a daily basis, we see leadership roles, and we do internalize that, and they form our expectations.
No, and I must say that I think now that you responded, I mean, I really see kind of how ingenious is this research design with the difference between expected and desired. And I just, you know, referring back to current events, I just saw a report from this last independent pollster in Russia, Levada Center, which I guess stays there and not being shut down because even the Kremlin wants to have some real data from time to time, about Russian youth. And the vast majority of Russian youth, there are two fascinating comments about expectations and desires. The vast majority of Russian youth strongly believe there would be no war up till the last moment. And now they managed to already do a follow-up survey, and the vast majority of Russian youth, well, I mean the vast majority, not the vast majority, but the majority, more than 50% of Russians aged 18 to 35 want to now leave the country. I mean, literally, yes. So you have, you know, that's kind of, I guess, what happens when expectation and desires don't meet. Yes, I mean, you just you know, you just want to, and I think what you are saying is, you know, a similar phenomenon in an organization. Yes, like when we don't get what we desire, I mean, we act very, you know, very firmly, yes, and very negatively. You know, even if we get something what we expect, yes, but like, especially if the two things come together, yes, you both didn't expect it, and you know, hate what is happening. Yes, I mean, I don't know if that is a relevant lesson here, but of course it's, you know, and it in a sense, it's, you know, it's all about leadership. Yes, it's people's reaction to their leader. And you, in your study, you even mentioned you included political leaders. Yes, so I guess I find this research of yours very informative for today's, you know, horrible days.
Yeah, thank you. And I think, I mean, that also points to the context, and I think the restrictions, maybe is one way to say it, of different leadership roles. You know, I mean, if you're let's say if you operate in a true democracy, although there probably isn't such a thing, a true full democracy, then what you do has to be affected by the expectations and or desires of other people. Otherwise you don't get elected, otherwise you get kicked out of office, you know, things like this. If you don't operate in this, then you have the freedom to essentially neglect these, which I think from a leadership standpoint is just poor leadership. But yeah, I think that's the context. That's where the context is so important.
At the risk of Thomas cutting us short, because I know he is always guarding time, I want to follow up, however, with a question, because when we talk about political leadership, we see a huge generational gap. I've emphasized in this case that these are 18 to 35-year-olds, but it happens all across the world. Yes, people are wildly different on the conception of what good life is, generationally, probably much more than, you know, some decades. I mean, always is the case, but like it's particularly acute now. So the question to your research, did you look at how how those trends look in different age groups?
No, and that's actually a great question, because, for example, so the two studies, I mean, I showed, one was basically 18 to 20-year-olds, more or less. The other one was a wide range. I mean, 20-somethings to 60-somethings, you know, I mean, literally had a couple CEOs, you know, of companies in there. So no, but I mean, I think generational, yeah, it's really interesting. And I think when I'll very quickly, Thomas, just to say that, to bring this back full circle to the idea of expectations and kind of what our experiences, how they influence us. I think one thing you see generations is this reactivity. And so, you know, I may expect that leadership looks like this because that's how I grew up seeing leadership. But I rebel against that. And instead, I actually desire something quite opposite. And I think that's another way that we could see that is through generations. Yeah, that's a great point.
No, thank you so much.
I think those have been the perfect closing remarks of your keynote presentation. Thank you very much, Austin. I would like to move on to the final part of the Open Day, which is the Q&A session. Maciej, if you would do me the honor and join me for the Q&A session, I think our attendees would appreciate.
Of course.
I've collected questions from the audience in the meantime. Very academic question for you, Maciej. Let's start with that question. What about exams? How do they look like? Are there any grades? What about the thesis?
Yeah, good question. We have a minority of our class, a small minority of our class do have an exam, kind of more, let's say, finance or like kind of number-driven classes. Most classes, but important, you don't actually write the exam during the module. You have like a 10-day exam period when you can like do it online at the comfort of your home at any point you choose. Most classes have team projects, and you spoke so eloquently, Thomas, about support teams, and I think it's all about them. I mean, they are so important. They are kind of the soul of the program, and we simply people do practical applied projects in those support teams, and in most projects they even include peer assessment, so you give each other feedback, yes, on how you contributed to the joint effort. We also don't have a thesis. We are an American university, an American MBA, and we don't think it's like the best use of your time to get, to write your own magnum opus that's going to gather dust on a shelf like this. Instead, we want to actually, again, to invite you for one more chance to do something real in real life. We call it a capstone project, and it includes two components. To graduate with our beautiful American and Austrian degree, you need to use some of the analytical skills. So you need to analyze some real life business situation, business plan, marketing strategy, HR strategy, whatever, but something that uses analytical skill. And the second part of our CEU executive MBA thesis is what we call the leadership component. And it's about kind of what Austin was talking about doing things, changing things in real life, in real world. Implement the project, including the project that you also do for the capstone. Some people do it kind of in kind of a process, in a value chain like of sorts, or mentor somebody, do something practical with practical impact. And when you do these two things, analyze and bring change, if small even, then you earn your CEU degree that you can hang on the wall.
The next question I would like to take is the question about application requirements and the application process. Let's start with the requirements before we enter the process. We are looking for people with at least 8 years of work experience, of which 3 years need to be managerial / any kind of leadership experience. We can make exceptions, but these exceptions need to be argued. So if you have, for example, 6 years or 7 years of work experience, you can still apply, but please tell us why you should be eligible still. Another prerequisite is a university diploma of any field of study. So it could be business administration, it could be political sciences, but it could also be piano or arts or medical or medicine. We have people from all of these backgrounds in the current program. So you're not going to be an exotic person if you have a different background than business. If you don't have a university diploma, you can again still apply, but again, you would need to make a case you could ask for equivalency if you have professional education, apprenticeships, etc., vocational trainings. We can make a case and possibly grant an exception to that. You would need to present at some stage of the application, you can hand it in later, proof of English, which can be easily done online with TOEFL or EILTS home test kits or Duolingo. Shouldn't be a problem to get a proof of English. And of course, we're required to upload some documents like a CV and the motivational letter and the certificates, etc. But usually that's not the biggest concern. From my experience, the part that usually takes most of the time within the application is drafting the motivation letter. If you're struggling with, the question what to write and how to write in the motivation letter, feel free to book a one-on-one consultation with me. I'd be happy to advise you based on your individual background and expertise, because of course, our life stories differ and it makes a difference what to write in the motivation letter. So assuming that you have completed and submitted your application online via our website, you will be invited to an interview with one of our faculty members. They will ask you questions based on a fixed questionnaire. The questionnaire can be found on our website, so you can basically assess yourself before the interview and get a feeling on where are my strengths and where are my weaknesses. We are not going to play mind games during the interview. It's just about getting to know you, your motivation, and your leadership style. If you're passing the interview phase, your case will be presented to the admission committee, because we are handpicking our students. And then you will receive an admission decision, and everything like that happens in only a couple of weeks. So the sooner you apply, if you applied basically today, you will receive an admission decision in a few weeks only. I think I've talked about COVID already. I mean, if it popped up as a question in the from the attendees, Maciej, if you would like to say something about the COVID measures, I mentioned something already, but if you want to add something to add, please feel free to.
Well, I mean, I would only say that we do everything possible to bring all of you in person. We have very good online option, but it's still not as good as being in person. Beyond that, I hope by the time you start your program, for those of you who will start the program, COVID will hopefully not longer be relevant.
Thank you for this question. And in view of the time, I would like to move on to the next question, which is a fundamental question for most of our guests, which is the question, is there financial support, scholarships, fellowships available? It's a clear yes. We offer a variety of scholarships and fellowships. The only question is which is the most suitable for you, for your individual person. That's why I invite you again to book a one-on-one consultation where you can, tell me like who you are, where you live, what your background is, so I can advise you on the financial support that we offer. But since most people are joining us tonight from the region here in Georgia, Azerbaijan, Russia, Turkey, Iran, etc., and Central Asia, I want to emphasize that we do offer besides the need-based scholarship for where everybody can apply, we offer a merit-based country-specific fellowship for people working in the public sector / NGO sector in Georgia, and a fellowship for businesswomen in Central Asia. So besides the need-based scholarship you can apply, if you think those fellowships are attractive, we offer international female leaders fellowships, LGBTIQ fellowships, fellowships for managers with a disability, for the Romani minority, etc., etc. There's so many of them. Please get in touch with me and I'd be happy to advise you on financial support. But there's lots of financial support that we offer, and we do not offer it as charity. It's part of our investment strategy because we invest in your talent, in your executive talent. So thank you very much for joining us here on site in Tbilisi and on site in Baku or online. Thank you very much. Get in touch with me and have a nice evening. Thank you, Austin. Thank you, Georgi.